means that any theory of consciousness is going to have to account for that. It's going to have to be based on that fact. That consciousness is subjective and it's irreducibly personal. It's always associated with a living entity. It's never found in inanimate objects in any way that we can observe. It's personal, it's intelligent, and it follows its own laws, separate from material objects. This is the first thing we have to understand about consciousness. It's transcendental. It's not a thing. A thing, you can take a thing, like water is a thing, and you can put some water in this glass, and then you can perform all kinds of experiments on it and see how it reacts and like that. You can never do that with consciousness. Consciousness is not a thing. Consciousness is a quality. See? It's a quality, just like a color is a quality of an object. You can't separate the color from the object. You can't take this red color and separate it out and put it in a test tube. You have red paper, red ink. You know, see, always a red something, red paint, red feather, or red this, or red that, a red shirt, whatever. You see, you never have a red all by itself. Red is an adjective. It's not a noun. That means that red is a quality. It's not a thing. Similarly, maybe it's misleading to talk about consciousness as if it's a thing. We ought to talk about conscious people, conscious soul. But of course, because we have other adjectives that modify conscious, see, spiritually conscious soul. Spiritually, this would fit in right in with Korzybski. That this habit, this bad habit we have of elemental, what's it called? Elementalization. Elementalism. Yeah. Elementalism means we take a quality and we treat it as a thing. Or we take a process and we treat it as a thing. But actually, you can't separate the quality from the thing that it is a quality of. So if we were to speak precisely about consciousness, we would not use it as a noun, consciousness. We would only use it as an adjective, a conscious soul, a conscious person. And then we would use other adjectives like a spiritually conscious person, a materially conscious person. Instead of trying to talk about it in the abstract, like material consciousness and spiritual consciousness. Those kind of talks are a little bit misleading, or that kind of terminology is a little bit misleading, because consciousness is not a thing. So we can't actually have a spiritual consciousness as a separate thing. But I can be spiritually conscious, you can be spiritually conscious, you see, because that's a quality of a person, a quality of a living entity. So anyway, we have a theory of consciousness that accurately predicts the changes in consciousness when acted upon either by material or spiritual influences. See, and our theory is very simple. It's the theory of the mirror. You take a mirror is nothing but a piece of glass with some silver on the back, but when you hold it up to the light, it becomes light. If you hold it up to something dark, it becomes dark. If I hold it up to something red, it becomes red. If I hold it up to my face, it shows my face. How is that possible? It's just a piece of glass. Because it reflects accurately. It duplicates whatever you put in front of it. Makes a copy of it. This is important. The mirror makes a copy of the image of the object that it reflects. Just by the way that it's built. It doesn't need any moving parts. It doesn't need a memory. It doesn't need a processor. It doesn't need a camera. Huh? But just by reflecting, the mirror makes a copy of whatever you put in front of it. Similarly, consciousness makes a copy of whatever you put in front of it. And these copies are called impressions. And the quality of these impressions determine the quality of your consciousness. It's very easy to understand. Just like I have this glass, right now it has some water in it. And it's nice and clear. But if I was to put coffee in it, then it would be all cloudy and brown and dark. You wouldn't be able to see through it. It wouldn't be clear anymore. Similarly, if I fill my consciousness with impressions of spirit, transcendental things, then my consciousness remains clear and pure like this water. See? If I fill my consciousness with material things, it's like filling it with coffee. It's nasty and dark and bad smelling and icky and opaque. Can't see through it. This is a similar thing to what happens when we fill our minds with material impressions. I want to say three things at the same time here. When we fill our mind with material impressions, then it becomes opaque, dark. It does not have a lot of its higher functions. It loses them because the opacity of the material impressions covers them over. A person whose mind is full of material impressions becomes covered over. And so they lose their higher intelligence. They lose certain abilities, like the ability to control their senses and so on. See, they lose the ability to sense the truth, which is very important. We talked about that the other night. So a person who wants to help themselves, they should begin to fill their consciousness with spiritual impressions. Spiritual impressions will cleanse the consciousness. Ceto darpana marjanam. Bhavamaha davagni nirvapanam. That one will clean the mirror of the mind by this process of chanting the holy name. This chanting the holy name, we chant over and over and over. Why? Because we want to make many, many, many impressions of spiritual quality to cleanse the mind. Right now our mind is filled with so many impressions, thousands and millions of impressions of material quality. That's why we're suffering. That's why we're in anxiety. That's why we're ignorant. That's why we're conditioned. So we have to, there's no way to get rid of them. We have to clean them. We can't go into denial. We can't make believe they're not there, because they are there and they affect us. We can't say, oh, all of a sudden I'm spiritual. Where's my halo? Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. That's not going to work. Just like some people, they go down to the church, they go to a pep rally, and then they come home and I'm born again. Yeah. Well, that lasts about 2 weeks, and then they're right back at the bar or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if you could hear that. He said, I'm dead again. Yeah. Spiritual life is like real life. And we feel refreshed automatically when we engage in spiritual life. Even though we just chanted like for over an hour straight. Between Vishnu Sahasranama and the Kirtan, we don't feel tired. We feel refreshed. We feel alert. The mind is cleansed, purified. And if you viewed this whole thing and went with us through that entire process, you're probably feeling that way too. Though maybe not as much as if you participated in it fully. So imagine what it would be like if you went and downloaded the 1,000 names of Vishnu and you learned the prayers and songs and you started to participate along with our kirtan. Then those impressions would be even more powerful, even more purifying. So I want to encourage you to do that. Now, question in my mind right at this time is, should we go on into the second part of Nectar of Devotion, or should we pause and discuss all the questions? Maybe I could summarize what we've been through so far, and then everyone can ask their questions, any questions that they might have. Do you feel like there's some need for that discussion, or should we just go on?
I think it would be good to recap the first part. I think it would be valuable to recap the first part of Nectar of Devotion, because it's a very different approach from the second part. Just deals in bhavas and like that, and it's a lot more abstract and hard